This is the Bible Book Club podcast.
The book of Ezra.
Welcome to the club.
When last we left you in Ezra chapters 3 and 4, once safely settled in Jerusalem, Joshua the priest and Zerubbabel turned their attention to rebuilding the temple. First on the list was the altar, so that they could fulfill the law written by Moses. They completed the altar in time to celebrate. Next up was the foundation for the temple. It was 2 years before they began this labor-intensive build. And when they completed the foundation, there was joy and weeping. With success comes opposition. And the neighbors are not happy that the Israelites are having success. The opposition began in the form of deceptive offers to help, fear tactics and threats, bribes to officials, and complaints to the king. Unfortunately, some of those tactics worked temporarily, and the progress stopped for 16 years.
Recall from the overview in episode 1 that there are 4 Persian kings pertinent to our story: Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes. Now, Cyrus is dead and Darius is king, but just so you know, there was a king in between them that's not mentioned. And for the record, Darius is not related to Cyrus. The crown passed to another Persian family. So Darius may not have been very familiar with what Cyrus had decreed 2 kings before him. We ended the last episode with the temple in a building delay.
Ezra 4, verse 24. Thus the work on the house of God in Jerusalem came to a standstill until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
Now, the fear tactics and bribes from the neighbors had halted the progress on the temple for years. It was time for God to step in. This episode is about providential opposition. In the last episode, we read about provincial opposition. The neighbors didn't like the new residents. And political opposition. The neighbors used politics to persuade the kings. In this round, God is going to step in and get this temple back on track. Scene 1. God provides prophet support for the people. The principle here is God provides what his people need to complete his work when they need it. In this case, the people needed exhortation and encouragement to overcome their discouragement.
Ezra chapter 5. Now, Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the prophet, a descendant of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, son of Jozadak, set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them.
God breaks the silence and provides bold leaders, 2 very different prophets, Haggai and Zechariah. Now, this is the cool thing about them. Both of these prophets have books in the Old Testament. We're just not going to get there for a while. Haggai's entire book of just 2 chapters corresponds to this period. Listen to Haggai 1.
In the 2nd year of King Darius, on the 1st day of the 6th month, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, son of Jozadak, the high priest. This is what the Lord Almighty says. These people say the time has not yet come to rebuild the Lord's house. Then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains in ruin? Now, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it.
So Haggai starts in the 2nd year of King Darius, exactly where we are in Ezra. Haggai is a plain speaker. He gets right to the point and accuses them. Hey, the Lord wants to know why you're living in nice houses while the temple is in a wreck. They're wasting their time and have nothing to show for it. Haggai uses not so gentle exhortation to get the people moving. And Haggai's rebuke worked according to Haggai 1:12.
Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, Joshua, son of Jozadak, the high priest, and the whole remnant of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the message of the prophet Haggai, because the Lord their God had sent him, and the people feared the Lord.
Why did the people listen? It says, because the Lord had sent Haggai and the people feared the Lord. Now, Zechariah, the other prophet God sent, also has a book. In fact, his first 8 chapters refer to what is happening right here in Ezra 5. Listen for a taste.
Zechariah chapter 1, starting in verse 16. Therefore, this is what the Lord says. I will return to Jerusalem with mercy, and there my house will be rebuilt, and the measuring line will be stretched out over Jerusalem, declares the Lord Almighty. Proclaim further, this is what the Lord Almighty says. My towns will again overflow with prosperity, and the Lord will gain comfort in Zion and choose Jerusalem. And then in Zechariah 4:6, so he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, said the Lord Almighty. What are you, mighty mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become level ground. Then he will bring out the capstone to shouts of, God bless it, God bless it. Then the word of the Lord came to me. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this temple. His hands will also complete it. Then you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you.
So Zechariah's words were words of encouragement. God used him to cast a vision of what was sure to come about because God was in control. God would rebuild his house in Jerusalem. The people of Judah would prosper. It would not happen by might or power, but through God's Spirit. And Zerubbabel, the one who started it, will finish it, so that they will know that God had ordained it all.
So were these words that Zechariah and Haggai were writing, was this happening during those 16 years when the rebuilding was paused and they were trying to get them to restart? Is that the timeline?
In the second year of Darius, God steps in and he sends these prophets and he says, get them going. And so one prophet, Haggai, it rebukes and exhorts, and the other prophet, Zechariah, gives them a vision and encourages. Yeah.
Well, I really like that you brought those two in right now so that we could really get an understanding of what was going on in the Israelites' mind right then.
Exactly. So the words of Haggai and Zechariah renewed their faith and rallied the people into action. With the people back on track, the temple building began again. The point is, God moves in the hearts of men to accomplish his will. Men who worship him and men who don't, like Tattenai. Scene 2, the opposition has a new name.
Now back to our story in Ezra 5, continuing in verse 3. At that time, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai and their associates went to them and asked, who authorized you to rebuild this temple and to finish it? They also asked, what are the names of those who are constructing this building? But the eye of their God was watching over the elders of the Jews, and they were not stopped until a report could go to Darius and his written reply be received.
So Tattenai was a Persian governor over the region that included Jerusalem. He must have been somewhat important because his name is documented in Persian tablets. Now, his questions to the Judeans are not thought to be as threatening as the Samaritans' questions were in our last episode. He is doing his job with an authoritative manner. And he does not stop the work, but seeks verification from headquarters that this building was in fact allowed. The point is that it doesn't matter how many new names are introduced. God has their number, and God will use them to accomplish his will. They all will fall to God's Spirit. Scene 3, Tattenai's report to the king.
Ezra 5, continuing in verse 6. This is a copy of the letter that Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai and their associates, the officials of Trans-Euphrates, sent to King Darius. The report they sent him read as follows. To King Darius, cordial greetings. The king should know that we went to the district of Judah, to the temple of the great God. The people are building it with large stones and placing the timbers in the walls. The work is being carried on with diligence and is making rapid progress under their direction. We questioned the elders and asked them, who authorized you to rebuild this temple and to finish it? We also asked them their names so that we could write down the names of their leaders for your information. This is the answer they gave us. We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, one that a great king of Israel built and finished. But because our ancestors angered the God of heaven, he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of King Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to the temple in Babylon. Then King Cyrus gave them to a man named Sheshbazzar, whom he had appointed as governor. And he told him, "Take these articles and go and deposit them in the temple in Jerusalem and rebuild the house of God on its site." So this Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundations of the house of God in Jerusalem. From that day to the present, it has been under construction, but is not yet finished. Now, if it pleases the king, let a search be made in the royal archives of Babylon to see if King Cyrus did in fact issue a decree to rebuild this house of God in Jerusalem. Then let the king send us his decision in this matter.
Tattenai is fair-minded and really very accurate. He states exactly what the king should know. These people are building a temple on your land. They say Cyrus gave them permission to build it. Then he asks the king to fact-check it in the royal archives.
All before AI.
Exactly. I can't imagine what those archives look like. Scene 4. The royal archives to the rescue.
Ezra chapter 6. King Darius then issued an order, and they searched in the archives stored in the treasury at Babylon. A scroll was found in the citadel of Ecbatania in the province of Media, and this was written on it. Memorandum. In the first year of King Cyrus, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place to present sacrifices, and let its foundations be laid. It is to be 60 cubits high and 60 cubits wide, with 3 courses of large stones and 1 of timbers. The costs are to be paid by the royal treasury. Also, the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, are to be returned to their places in the temple in Jerusalem. They are to be deposited in the house of God. Now then, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai, and you other officials of that province, stay away from there. Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site.
The end result was a miracle. What happens next is unbelievable. Darius's decree flips the script on the enemies of Judah.
Verse 8. Moreover, I hereby decree what you are to do for these elders of the Jews in the construction of this house of God. Their expenses are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates, so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and wheat, salt, wine, and olive oil, as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, must be given to them daily without fail, so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Furthermore, I decree that if anyone defies this edict, a beam is to be pulled from their house, and they are to be impaled on it. And for this crime, their house is to be made a pile of rubble. May God, who has caused his name to dwell there, overthrow any king or people who lifts a hand to change this decree or to destroy this temple in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have decreed it. Let it be carried out with diligence.
So Darius not only confirms the building can go on, but flips the script by commanding the opposition to fund it with taxes, supplies, and even animals for sacrifices. After years of stalling the build, the returned exiles have a miraculous moment when bureaucracy actually works for them. God used Tattenai to bring those dusty, forgotten scrolls to the light. Then King Darius decrees that the underdog is now the top dog. Not only can the exiles build their temple, but they also get whatever they need to build and to sacrifice. all expenses paid by Persia. On top of that, any pesky complaining neighbor who interferes is dead, and it will not be a pretty death. The threats and fear that once plagued the Jews are transferred to the very people who initiated them. It is a clear case of what man intends to harm, God can redirect for good. God brought the long-buried truth to the light. Just as God had providentially raised up Cyrus, God placed Tattenai, a foreign administrator, over Jerusalem who moved in their favor. And then God moved in the heart of King Darius to do the right thing. Sometimes opposition is providential. God can and does use opposition to accomplish his purposes. In this case, opposition resulted in an all-expense-paid temple. Similarly, opposition in your life can build you into a better temple. Opposition refines, strengthens, redirects, and builds us. And if it builds us, it builds the church. Opposition is not the end of the story. It is often a sign that God is at work writing an even more glorious story, one better than we could have imagined. And isn't that what we want? To glorify God? Perhaps we should flip the script and take pleasure in opposition because we know it glorifies God in the end. Can't you just hear the enemy grinding his teeth about that? He brings opposition. And rather than being discouraged, we should rejoice. It's just going to kill him. Scene 5, the temple is finally finished.
Verse 13. Then, because of the decree King Darius had sent, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai and their associates carried it out with diligence. So the elders of the Jews continued to build and prosper under the preaching of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah, a descendant of Iddo. They finished building the temple according to the command of God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, kings of Persia. The temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month Adar in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy. For the dedication of this house of God, they offered 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 male lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, one for each of the tribes of Israel. And they installed the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their groups for the service of God at Jerusalem, according to what is written in the book of Moses.
Because of Tattenai's report, because of Darius's decree, because of Haggai and Zechariah's preaching, because of Zerubbabel and Joshua's leading, because of the people's zeal to build, all of this was because of God. Because of God, the temple was completed. The temple where God would meet the people he had chosen, the people he had redeemed so many times over, the people who carried the seed of the Savior who would redeem humanity with just one sacrifice and put an end to our dependence on this very temple. And with it, the need for repetitive sacrifice for the atonement of sin. How many times in our journey through the Bible, in all the stories we've read, have we seen this lesson over and over again? But for God, the patriarchs, but for God, the kings, but for God, David, but for God, we couldn't ever be free from sin, Satan, and opposition. He is the only thing that stands between us and destruction. His plan saves. His plan began in the beginning, and he will see it through to the end. This is what he's doing for the Israelites right here. The temple built. He's seeing it through. Scene 6, the first Passover in the new temple.
Verse 19. On the 14th day of the first month, the exiles celebrated the Passover. The priests and Levites had purified themselves and were all ceremonially clean. The Levites slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the exiles, for their relatives, the priests, and for themselves. So the Israelites who had returned from the exile ate it together with all who had separated themselves from the unclean practices of their Gentile neighbors in order to seek the Lord, the God of Israel. For 7 days, they celebrated with joy the festival of unleavened bread, because the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Syria so that he assisted them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel.
This is another subliminal concept I don't want us to miss in the Bible, because we've talked about the Passover a lot, more than I ever anticipated that we would when we started this journey. So the Jewish calendar starts with the month of Nisan. God commanded Moses in Exodus 12:1 that this would be the first month of their year, and in that month, they were to celebrate the Passover. It was supposed to be first. The Passover was a celebration of their redemption from slavery the first time after the first Exodus. Now recall from our last episode that the temple building began in the second month, which would have been right after they celebrated the Passover. It was a celebration of their redemption from slavery for a second time after the second Exodus. The temple was then finished on the third day of Adar in Darius' 6th year, around March 12th, 515 BC. Providentially, this was just in time to celebrate the Passover, linking back once again to the Exodus story. The building began right after the Passover and was completed right before the Passover. Took about 20 years. Everything about the temple pointed to their redemption, not just once, but twice. Did God want them to remember and to never forget again that He always initiated the relationship? He was faithful. Could they learn to be faithful too? Why do believers not celebrate the Passover? It is mentioned more than any other religious celebration in the Bible. 49 times in the Old Testament and 28 in the New. Jesus' Last Supper was the Passover meal. It seems to me that we are missing the celebration of our redemption day. That night before the crucifixion, where God prepared our sacrificial lamb. That night when He took on the weight of the world and said, "Not my will, but yours, Lord." Was God not reminding us of this in that Passover Last Supper? Hey, was He saying, I've always been here and I'm going to redeem you once and for all. I remember you. Will you remember me? It's so interesting to me that we celebrate the good news on Easter, but we don't have a ceremony like the Passover ceremony that the Jews celebrate that helps us remember all that the sacrifice that saved us entailed. Well, between 1 Chronicles chapter 1 and Ezra chapter 6, we have discussed 71 chapters written by the prolific Ezra. He has painstakingly documented Israel's history. And finally, in our next episode, we are going to meet the man himself. Ezra is going to arrive on the pages of his beloved story.
One of my personal Bible benders is how every book builds on the ones before. So if you're new here or you just skipped ahead, go back and listen to some of the previous seasons of Bible Book Club. You will find Bible benders too. And if you're enjoying the Bible Book Club, why don't you share it? And then you and all your friends can listen and discuss. New episodes drop every Monday.